glad you're here. My name is Crispina French, and I'm your host of the Rags to Riches podcast. I'm an OG textile alchemist, worked my way through art school making ragamuffins from thrift store sweaters way back in the 1980s. That college side hustle grew into a full-fledged business, and here I am to show you that you can do that too. Together, we'll navigate hurdles, challenges, and accomplishments while crafting your profitable textile upcycling business to serve you and the planet. My guests and I will cover topics including material sourcing, business savvy, product development, sales and marketing, and self-care. Overcoming struggles, celebrating wins, and reaping rewards of running your very own textile upcycling business is what we are all about. Are you ready to be inspired, energized, and supported? This is the Rags to Riches Textile Upcycling Podcast. This episode of the Rags to Riches Textile Upcycling Podcast is brought to you by The Unruffled. The Unruffled is a vibrant and feminine collection of slow-made garments and accessories handmade with love by Sandra Primo. Sandra is based in Austin, Texas, and every item she makes is thoughtfully constructed from finely sourced, reused textiles, favoring silks and lace and crochet. Bespoke, one of one, encouraging an infinite circle of recovery. Step into the world of The Unruffled at www.theunruffled.com. And visit the show notes page for this episode at ragstorichestextileupcyclingpodcast.com for links and more information. Hey, so today I really want you guys to meet some people that I just met, but I've been kind of following around in the neighborhood for quite some time. It's kind of funny. We're kind of like neighbors. We're both based in Western Massachusetts and we have friends in common, but this is actually the first time we've met and, to chat with. We're not actually sitting in the same room. We're actually looking at each other through the window of our screens. But I have with me today, I have Kirby and Sarah from this really cool upcycling company called WallaSauce, based in North Adams, Massachusetts. And I guess you guys are probably like maybe an hour's drive from me. I'm over in Beckett. And actually, it's kind of fun when I have two guests because we get to have like more perspective. So the first question I usually ask people is like, tell us like a little backstory. Give us a little bit of history about like, how did you guys meet? How did you get started with textile upcycling? Give us what you got. What do you got?
So we'll start from like how the company was found, I guess. So 2013-14, WallaSauce started as a barbecue sauce company, actually. So it was, just out of pure coincidence that like we ended up meeting up at MCLA.
Wait, hold on a second. You started by making barbecue sauce.
He started making barbecue.
I've always wondered, like, why? What's up with the sauce? Like, tell me what the sauce is about. Right. So this is the sauce.
Yeah. And like,
okay,
it actually kind of worked in our favor when we ended up like making clothes because sauce ended up becoming like a fashionable term. Like if you got lost in the sauce, that meant like, like it meant a number of things. So it just kind of like ended up helping us out in that kind of like image that we had.
That is awesome. I love that. Wait, so do you barbecue? Are you like a barbecue guy?
Not like really. Like my uncle gave me this recipe of, just like this basic barbecue sauce. And then I kind of like just tweaked it and made it like my own. And then like senior year of high school and into freshman year and like sophomore year of college, like I was just slinging it to like teachers, students, like,
oh my God. So you started this as a kid.
Yeah. So it was,
wow,
but it was
okay.
more like that was just like the entrepreneurial aspect. So then once I got to MCLA and I think it was junior year, so 2016, 2017 or sophomore year, that was kind of when I started shying away from sauce because I started learning more about like the liability thing. So like I was yeah, like if I make a sauce that gets someone sick, they could like sue me for everything that I have because I'm not like an LLC. Yeah. So then started, hanging out with Sarah. Sarah is a really great artist, and we were working on like doing like pins and patches and sticker designs and stuff like that. And like, college, like everyone kind of wants that kind of stuff, like stickers to slap up their laptop and whatnot. So we started making those, and ultimately that led to getting patches and sewing those onto like t-shirt pockets. So like making like pocket tees with like different patches and stuff. And then it was kind of like, you know, if you want us to take it from here, because then this is kind of where you roll into it with the pocket tees.
Well, we started making, like, at first we weren't upcycling. We were just learning how to sew. So like, I like to make people gifts for birthdays and stuff. So I was like out of ideas, and I was like, my mom had a sewing machine, and I got some fabric at Joann's and I made pocket tees. And then from then on, we started making like custom hoodies and pocket tees. And then we started.
These are still like patched with your imagery and stuff on them.
Yeah, we were doing like hand embroidery, and they weren't like, they were branded WallaSauce, but they weren't as intricate as the stuff that we make now is. It was more like we were learning. I took a class in like 6th grade. I made a dog bed and like a stuffed guitar, and like that was it. I thought that was my last time on a sewing machine, but then in college I picked it up again, and then it was just kind of like showed him what to do, and then we learned a lot of like just worked our way up to where we are now, just doing it every day. So
yeah. So did you guys, so you met, so MCLA is Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts for anybody who's not a Berkshireite. And that is located also in North Adams, which is where WallaSauce is based. And I know you guys have like a storefront, right? Is that right on Main Street? Yeah, right. Yeah. 77 Main Street. So if you're in the Berkshires and you go to Massamoka, which is a big draw for North Adams, don't forget that WallaSauce is actually probably just as much fun as Massamoka. So step in and see these guys. But Sarah, tell me a little bit about your history. Did you grow up in the Berkshires, or where did you grow up? Are you from this area?
I grew up in Rhode Island, like 20 minutes outside of Providence, a town called Situate. And then I actually went to Champlain for my freshman year, which is up in Vermont. And then it was too expensive. So I was looking for a similar area with mountain ranges and a lot of outdoorsy stuff, and found MCLA, and then just ended up I went for English. So did my final 3 years there. And then we just ended up rolling through with this still. So
cool. So, and you said your mom had a sewing machine. So like, was that something that you did as a kid, or was it just something that you kind of like touched upon and then sort of circled back to?
It's funny because every time I always thought it was my grandmother's sewing machine, because my mom didn't really sew. But then she made like a handful of our Halloween costumes. I remember as a kid, like I think she made me a witch costume one year, which she says she wasn't proud of, but I'm sure it was great. But she wasn't an avid sewer. No, she just had the machine, and then I still have it. I use it for certain products because it's got a lot of stitches on it. But she wasn't crazy. But my grandmother was really into fashion, and growing up, I like wanted to get into fashion somehow, which I thought was through modeling at one point, which turned out to be a total bust. So then a few years later, coming across clothing design, I thought that was really fun to kind of round out that experience, because she's always been influential to me, but I never really figured out how I was going to, follow through with that. But,
yeah. And how cool that you're in this place now where you're in the fashion industry, if you will, but you're also like, you're sort of dismantling and recreating fashion and contributing to like the, planetary healing, if you will. And you're also, getting to hang out in this cool town with your partner and creating this cool business. So that is, I think your grandmother's probably pretty proud of you.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's so cool. So, I always like to prowl around and kind of learn as much as I can about folks before I start chatting with them. And I just have kind of watched this evolution of, you have a really cool thing going on. Like your work is, it's scrappy in the best way that I love that. Right. But it's also got this like beautiful, like really thought through finish that I think kind of sets it apart from other work. Can you speak a little to that?
Thank you. You want to say anything?
I mean, as far as like the creation of it, it all starts with an idea, like, the one thing that I really enjoy doing for like my practices, I enjoy making the Kuji stuff, so to speak. So, that's just really like a good way for us to be able to like use our scraps and also make something that like the first, evolution of it was just because I was like, hey, I really want one of those Coogee sweaters that like everyone is selling on eBay for $500 because they're super exclusive. Like I wanted to make my own. So, we had made all these beanies and we had all these knit scraps. So then like it just kind of like happened. And like as soon as we made that first one, it was just like, whoa, like a step back. And it's just like, all right, like how are we going to like roll this out? And like how are we going to be able to like, you know, keep reinventing it and keep making it fresh, and like every single, time that like we introduce, I like to think of it like a style, like a house style, like, how just like houses have different like things that they're known for. Like that's something that I definitely would like to like keep rolling. But Sarah's got plenty of things that like she does just like for experimentation, and just like if it sticks, she just rolls with it. And if not, then, on to the next one. But I'll let her talk about that.
Like, Crispina, working with like upcycled materials, like you don't always have a say in what you make sometimes. Like you have to listen to what you have. And so, especially when like people want to give us their clothing, like people want to see us turn the things that they had into something new, because it makes, it alleviates a problem. Okay, where does my clothes go? I don't want. And then it creates an avenue for a creation, which is really cool. But, sometimes we get random things. Sometimes we get stuff we really can't use. Sometimes we get like a gold mine of material. Like when Lila came with those, with the material from, your leftover like knit scraps, we were like, are you freaking kidding me?
Oh,
like
perfect.
It was amazing. And so we don't always have a choice. So I like to think about, like anything that I do really outside of sewing and just my whole life is like, how do I do this as sustainably as possible? Considering all that I know, and that is always changing and growing. And, I might learn something that shows me that maybe what I was doing wasn't actually the most sustainable way to do something. But thinking through that lens really helps me understand like the capacity of which we intake and output, and also like what can be used for other things. There are millions of things that exist. Like all it takes is a little bit of attention to detail and a little bit of effort to organize and plan ahead to make really circular creations. It's honestly a lot of fun. I love problem solving and figuring shit out. Like even when I was a little kid, I'd take my toys apart and I try to put them back together. Like to me, this is what that feels like. Like how do I deal with the trash problem?
Yeah. You know what I think of a lot when I'm thinking about that stuff is like, you're taking like this big pile of stuff, right? Scrap stuff that other people think is trash, but they just don't know. Mm-hmm. And you're just reorganizing it. Mm-hmm. All you're doing is putting like the scraps in the shape that turns into a Coogee sweater. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like, and for the longest time, I thought that was so easy. Everybody could do this, and like realizing that like actually not everybody can do this. And not only can they not do it, they can't even imagine it. So that when we have these gifts that we're able to go like, I'm going to figure out how to do this most sustainably. I'm going to have a whole bunch of fun doing it. And then the other thing that I see you guys doing, which I have to say is just phenomenal, is you don't replicate, right? Like everything is one of one. We know that. This is upcycled. But you take that Coogee idea and you go, how are we going to roll this out so that we can repeat it in a manner that is similar? And I'm going to be able to say, oh, somebody sees you wearing your Coogee sweater and they're like, oh my gosh, I totally love that sweater. Great. You can buy one on my website. It's not going to be exactly the same. And that, I think that piece right there is something that a lot of textile upcycling businesses just don't get to. And when you can get to that, then you got a really good thing going. Because, if you said, oh, yeah, thanks, I'm glad you like my Coogee sweater, but it's the only one I'm ever going to make. Come to my website and you're selling like baby doll dresses. Well, it's not gonna, it's just not the same, right? People don't, they want what they see. And when you can kind of like bring that to them with the education of like, why is it different? What, you're reorganizing all that trash. Okay, cool. Right.
And what I feel like, and that's one thing that you do very well and like are very successful in like you make like a lot of like the home decor stuff. And like, it's so funny because, like a year or two ago, I was washing windows with my friend, and I got to this house and there's a Crispina pillow right on the chair. And I literally said to her, I was like, hey, I'm like, this is a really nice pillow. They're like, yeah, thanks. Like someone local made that. I can't think of the name right off the head. I'm like, Crispina, right? Crispina French. They're like, yeah, that's it. That's who it was. And I'm like, it's so recognizable that it's your style, that it's so like, it's just so important to have that individuality. And I definitely just want to applaud you for that, because it's really it's remarkable for sure.
Well, thank you. And I think that actually, I think that you guys have that too. I feel like, I mean, I literally, we could talk for like hours, you guys. I think that there's such importance in that, like having your own process and aesthetic that is not like something that you're going to find on Instagram. It's not something that you saw on Pinterest. It's like yours. And yeah, I mean, and I even think like sometimes it's actually better for people like us who are really creative to just be like, I have this really cool idea. I'm going to do sustainable clothing, and I'm just going to like, I don't want to be influenced. I want it to come through me. Like, I don't want to have it fed to me. I want to. And when you like, I don't know if this resonates, let me know. But like when you were talking about making that first Coogee sweater, Kirby, when I made the first potholder rug, I had this like, I can't tell you it was an out of body experience because it wasn't, but it was like this, it just kind of happened. Like it just kind of channeled, like, I had all the stuff I needed to make it like around me. And I had this giant pile of material I didn't know what I was going to do with. And I was definitely not going to throw it away. And it just kind of unfolded. And then I looked at it, and when you described your process of just like stepping back and looking at it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the same way. And like, you just look at it, you're like, holy crap. Like
it's a eureka moment, right? Like
it is like literally, right? Like, yeah. Super cool. Hey, listen, you guys, we are chatting with Sarah and Kirby from WallaSauce, and we're going to come right back. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with you. Today's episode of Rags to Riches podcast is brought to you by the Stitcherhood Recycling Society, my online membership community for creative textile upcycling, recycling, and reuse entrepreneurs. Inspiration, shared experience, tutorials, business savvy, and connection to a whole posse of people who understand the passion and intricacies of running an environmentally kind, creative textile upcycling biz. Daily posts, weekly stitch hours, book recommendations, group chats, member profiles, and strong connections is what you can expect when you join Stitcherhood. Head on over to stitcherhood.crispina.eco and sign up for a free 7-day trial to see if my Stitcherhood Recycling Society is a good fit for you and your textile upcycling business. All right, we're back with Sarah and Kirby from WallaSauce. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about materials. And you guys were referencing some fabrics that came to you on a circuitous route. There was a stop in my studio. And I want to share a little bit about that material because it's something that is another aspect of kind of like the magic that we get to experience as textile upcyclers. So, a little backstory. I started a production company making stuff out of recycled sweaters in 1987, which I know was before you guys were born. You're not that old. So when I started, it was wool sweaters. It was before polar fleece wasn't even invented yet. So there was a ton of wool sweaters in the thrift store because people would wash them and they would shrink. And, women would be like, my husband. And I'd be like, thanks, hubby. And getting all this like awesome felted sweaters from the Goodwill. And one of the companies that I loved their sweaters was called Cambridge Dry Goods. And they were, I guess they were based out near Boston, like in the Cambridge area. And, over the years, whatever, like everything kind of shifted. And now, wool is a lot less prevalent in the thrift stream. But a few years ago, it was, I guess it was actually before the pandemic. I think it's going to be like, like time is going to be, before pandemic, after pandemic, before Christ, after Christ, like all that is going to happen. But I got these emails from this gentleman who was emailing me about this, a bunch of sweaters he had, and he wanted to give them to me. And like you said earlier, like sometimes you get bags of sweaters and you're just like, yeah, these are really not something I can use. But, I'm always, whatever, you want to be kind and thoughtful. So I responded. I was like, oh yeah, we were having an open studio, and I thought, well, maybe you want to come to the open studio. So sure enough, this guy shows up and he's got like a pretty big like SUV full of boxes of sweaters. And the story unfolds. He's telling me that he worked at Cambridge Dry Goods from the time he was in high school, and he became their CEO. Wow. And he never went to college, and he just worked at Cambridge Dry Goods, and he designed sweaters. He went to China. He had sweater samples knit. He had all of this experience by just doing it. And when they closed the company, and I think it was in like the mid to late 90s at some point, he had kept all of the samples. Like they, instead of knitting the whole sweater as a sample, they would knit like the body, like the front of the sweater with the ribbing. And then sometimes they do like different color variations through that one sample. Yeah. So he gave me like an SUV load of boxes full of this material. And that's what you guys had some of. So that's amazing. There's a little like travel history, and this guy, and he was over the moon excited that I was excited about these things. He'd had them in a storage unit for 20 years or something. And yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So your Coogee sweaters, right? Like, there you go.
Right.
Yep. We made so many beanies with those too. So you might see someone walking around with a piece of that fabric on their head. Like, it's such a cool full circle way to do things.
Yeah.
The best part too about that lot that you gave us was like, since they were samples, and what we do is like for the beanies, we take that rib and that's the flip up. So it's like, it makes the flip up, like, so it makes the whole shape of the beanie and stuff. So on some of them, when you flip them up, since they're samples, they literally have like sample written like in Sharpie right over the thing. So, and we've had people like come in and they're like, hey, like, do you have any others that like don't say sample on them? And we're like, no, we don't. And then we've had other people who come in, they're like, oh, awesome. And like, let's throw it right on. You're like, yeah, sweet. Like, this is a sample. It's a 1-of-1. And it's like, yeah, you get it. Like, this is this is meant for you. Like
just because someone decided to write on that with Sharpie doesn't make it unusable. It actually provides the backstory, like right. You were just saying.
Exactly. And it's funny too how I think like, in our culture today, how there's so, everything is kind of mass produced. And actually, I think most people don't realize that every single piece of clothing made is made by hands. Like, there are no machines that like sew on sewing machines. Like, it's all manual labor. So that when you see that handwriting, or some of them I noticed, I don't know if you guys saw this on the batch you wound up with, but some of it was written like in different languages, different alphabets. Like, there was information shared that was like telling like the next person down the line, like, this color is good, or like, whatever. I don't know what it said because it was in different languages, but like, that's awesome. It sort of imbues this like other value, right? Like, there's more hands touch this thing, right? It's just kind of like this cool reminder of all the people that are involved in the process of creating pretty much anything.
Well, it's really funny too, like that you say that, because we share our space with a weaver. And she has emphasized to us many times that every time her hands touch each thread like 10 times before she weaves. And then she weaves, and then there's fabric that then has to be sewn, right? So these steps of creating things from the very beginning, like, you're right. I don't think people realize like how many people are in contact with this one thing before it ends up in your hands, whether it's a small business or a fast fashion company, especially when they have when they're doing piecework and it's in a line and everybody has to do their part on one piece to get paid. It's like, it's a crazy system, not a great system, but just to think about the people involved, like it's really interesting.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it's really something that I think there's more and more attention and awareness of, that that it's actually really highly skilled labor for the most part that
Absolutely.
kind of gets, underpaid, under-acknowledged, I mean, we think, clothing manufacturing that happens overseas in China or wherever is bad. Let me just tell you, like, clothing manufacturing that happens in any major city in this country is not great. People do not get honored for the skills they've honed their whole lives. And I think it's changing. I think people like you guys and makers who are like bringing awareness to that. You have a storefront, people can come in, they can see your process, they can understand like, oh, that's how you do it. And then they start to really like I always think of textile upcycling as like the gateway into like, it's not really a drug, but it's like a gateway into this like,
mindset,
lifestyle and awareness of like the good life, if you ask me.
100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny that you bring that up too, like the fact where you're like, not many people like realize where their fabric is coming from and stuff, because we're working with Meg to like make an umbrella project that like encompasses like our stuff, like upcycling and sewing with her weaving, so that everything that we're going to be making with the project is going to be totally made North Adams, right down from the fabric all the way down to like the finished garment. And like just to like offer that to people is just so crazy, because it's such a dying art. And it's not like we're in New York City. It's not like we're in LA. We're in North Adams, so it's like to offer that and like make it something that can put the city, like it can like give the city an identity just from something that is like, one thing ends up getting super popular. You just never know.
In a city that was primarily textile manufacturing.
Right.
Like for
that's exactly
where
I was going with that. And like, also, I mean, the whole thing we were talking about, like when you were talking about the pillow you saw in the house, like to identify, to create an identity. It doesn't matter if it's a company, if it's a location, it's like, it makes people connect. Right. And like, it's also like, it's old, right? Like, think about how people made like linen fabric, right? Like somebody had to grow the linen, somebody had to like harvest it and then wet it and then spin it. And then like, somebody told me recently that it took 4 years from the time the seed went into the ground until somebody was wearing that shirt for linen. And if you're taking, I mean, that's a little extreme. Like we're not there yet, but like to have somebody weaving the fabric and have you guys creating that into something that's like, I mean, and every single little tiny town, every family did that, right? At one point.
Exactly.
And Meg's literally bringing that back. It's funny you bring up linen, because her window display right now is a mannequin covered in
flax,
in pre-processed flax. So it's just out of the ground, dried flax. And it says flax is linen on the window. And it has a little bit of like information about the process. But that's exactly right. Like, I think it takes a couple of years for the flax to even be mature enough to harvest. So it's not an overnight thing. It's such a slow process to make for all elements of the production, really.
And she did grow that flax, because I asked her, I was like, where'd you get that from? She's like, this is the flax that I grew. Because there was like a couple summers ago, she was like, yeah, guys, I'm growing flax, like this, that, the other thing. And like, we were like, whatever. And then like, finally, it ends up coming up and it's
in
like,
the window.
Yeah, right. But it's
like the flax star. Like,
it just looks like hay, though. It just looks like straw. And I'm like, this is what it is. But it's like,
what it is.
You gotta, you gotta beat it. You gotta spin it. You gotta do all that stuff. So it really, it is.
It's a process. And then when you stop and think about that, and you start to like really see the value in like, oh my gosh, like, you go to wherever, TJ Maxx or like wherever store, H&M, and you're like, you go buy a pair of linen pants because, you got to go to a wedding or something. And you're like, it gives you pause when you stop and realize like, oh my gosh, like all of this linen in this store was that, like you've got in your window right now. And like somebody did that. Somebody did all of those steps, right?
Yep.
Like,
and then we have the counter of that, which is the majority of things on the rack in there are probably unnatural materials and polyester fibers and acrylic fibers and things that actually like are not like things that don't hold their quality. Like the reason that flax and linen, like people put in that effort is because the product, is worth it. And in the end,
you'd wear it for like maybe your life, right?
Exactly.
Or you'd pass it, the next 3 kids would have that for their,
And you'd learn how to repair, and you'd learn how to alter things, and you'd learn how to make things work instead of cycling things in and out of your life based on aesthetic trends or like whatever it might be. It's really come a long way.
One thing that we often like have conversations with is like, like the society that we live in now versus like what it was 60 years ago, where like when something broke or, needed to be mended, things were repaired and they were fixed. They weren't planned obsolescence. Like it wasn't like, oh, this is going to break in 5 years, you're going to have to buy a new one. It's like, yeah, it's going to break in 5 years, you're going to bring it to the mechanic. The mechanic's going to, maybe get another year or 2 out of it. You're going to really stretch it out, do whatever you can. And then that's when you like figure it out. Cause I talked to my grandmother. I'm originally from like near New Bedford, Mass. So like the town over Fairhaven, and she worked in the New Bedford factories, growing up. And when she came over from the mainland, so she distinctly remembers like from the work going from you sew the whole garment to piecework, like in the factories, and it decimated people's paychecks because she would tell me like she was such a fast worker that she would sew all these things, and in turn her like the people that she worked with couldn't keep up with her, so like she would make more money than the people that she was working with. So oftentimes she would have to like slow down production in order to like have the other people keep up with her. And it's like that just, I don't know, it got to a point, oh god. And
the other thing I think it does is it really removes any level of pride. Like when you only can do like the same thing over every day, like put the bra strap on the bra all day long. You don't look at your pile at the end of the day and go, look at all this cool stuff I made. It's like you're tired and all you want to do is go home and you never want to do that thing again. Right. But when you have at the end of the day, this, stuff that you have completed and that's going out into the world, then you have like a level of pride in it. And I think that is like, it's really important for people to feel good. Right. Like I feel like there's I kind of joke about it a lot. It's like, if it's not fun, don't do it. Like Ben Cohen from Ben and Jerry's, like there's a bumper sticker that I used to have on my car. And like, I think that's so true. And I think, I actually just learned pretty recently that there's like science now coming out that like, seriously, like if you don't have fun, you should not be doing that. Like fun is like good for people. And honestly, I feel like it's really good for culture, and it's not frivolous. It's just, it's important. So, it's really, I think from what I see, you guys have a whole bunch of fun doing what you're doing. Your imagery, the way you present yourselves online, and your presence is like, it's really cohesive. It is fun to look at. And then there's, wearing your clothing is fun because it's really collaged and colorful and pattern on pattern. And I just, I think that it's awesome. I wanted to just ask, you had mentioned earlier that you have your storefront, you have your website, and then you also do like little markets and stuff like around and about, right? How can people learn more about where you're going to be next?
We usually update on our Instagram. We'll share the posts usually associated with whatever the event is. And there's usually a majority in the summertime. So it's Pittsfield. Sometimes, sometimes we get out a little further. A few years ago, we went to Providence and did some stuff there. But we usually keep the Instagram updated. So keep an eye out there for anything. Yeah.
Cool. So if you're not anywhere that you can hop on the Instagram right now, I just want to say that you should definitely check out WallaSauce at Instagram, right? Can you spell it just so they have a really clear...
All right. So the brand is WallaSauce, but on Instagram that handle was taken, so we're WallaSauce, like the name Wallace, like WallaCe, and then sauce. Just so
that is really good to know, because I noticed that and I'm like, did I misspell this? Is this the right way? So yeah, good to know. So Wallace, like the first name, sauce, like the, barbecue sauce, on Instagram, all one word, look them up. And then from there, you'll be able to access their other links to their website. And of course, if you're in the Berkshires, go go and visit them. Seriously, it's like a really fun place. North Adams in general is awesome. And I bet your store is pretty awesome too. I will get up there one of these days soon.
You should.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. So I just want to thank you guys for just making the time to spend here with me and to just share your story. Thank you so much. And thanks for just doing really important work in the world.
Thank you for having us. And likewise, I mean, you paved the way for a lot of it in this area, especially, I think. So it's nice to have, a community based around something that really sits in our values,
Right. You definitely, it's like whenever someone mentions upcycle, they always are like, oh, you've heard Crispina French. So it's almost like, it's a good like spot to be in. Yeah. So keep doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's actually, I have to say, one of the reasons why I really love podcasting is because I love to promote what other people are doing. When I first started, I thought, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to make people realize that they just are throwing stuff away they should just be holding on to. And, it wasn't very long into it where I was like, holy crap, I need all the help I can get. Like, oh my God. And, I do. We need all the help we can get. So, the whole kind of premise of being here, having the Rags to Riches podcast, having the Rags to Riches Summit is to really just bring what we are doing front and center and let people know, like, it does not matter what your aesthetic is. It does not matter what your style is. There are people out there creating beautiful, handmade, upcycled clothing, home goods, anything textile that will meet your needs and be a really great sustainable option for your living and your lifestyle. So thanks for being part of that.
Of course. And there's a really great quote that I've heard that I just want to share. Maybe it'll resonate with somebody else, but I don't know who said it, but it's along the lines of, we don't need a world where we have a handful of people living a zero waste lifestyle perfectly. We need a world where everybody's living an imperfect zero waste lifestyle, where everybody is trying and making some kind of effort in any type of way. Just thinking about these things is a phenomenal first step into a sustainable lifestyle. So you don't have to do crazy things to really make a difference.
Get a worm bin.
That's beautiful. Yeah, get a worm bin. That's beautiful. That is awesome. You guys, thank you so much. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for ending with that. Yeah. Hey, so I'm over here and I'm serving you a giant air hug because you just finished another episode of the Rags to Riches Textile Upcycling podcast. Thank you for being with me. Our music is provided by The Lucky Five. Learn more about them at thelucky5.com. Our show is produced and edited by Vandal Hyacinth. If you want to dive in deep, head over to Rags to Riches Textile Upcycling Podcast.com.